He's good.
We're going to call tonight's meeting to order. I'm going to give tonight's invocation. If you will, please bow your head with me. Father in heaven, we just thank you for today. We thank you for the ability to be here to serve both you and the city of Hernando. Father, we ask that you just carry us through the instruction of your ways and also the betterment to the city and its people. We pray for all those that are sick right now, all those that have lost loved ones. We pray for our federal, state, and local governments. And most of all, we pray for our military. Father, we ask all these things in your most holy and gracious name. Amen.
Amen.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Ashworth, Commissioner Thorne,
Here.
Commissioner Clark,
Here.
Commissioner Carter,
Here.
Commissioner Jordan,
Here.
Commissioner Hawkins,
Here.
Commissioner Skeen,
Here.
Commissioner Brumbelow.
All right, has everyone had a chance to look at the minutes from the regular meeting on November 9th, 2021? And if so, do I have a motion and a second?
Motion.
Second. Adam McKee.
Commissioner Clark,
Aye.
Commissioner Thorne,
Aye.
Commissioner Jordan,
Aye.
Commissioner Hawkins,
Aye.
Commissioner Skeen.
Aye.
And has everyone had a moment to look or approve the special meeting held on December 12th, 2021? Do I have a first and a second?
Motion. Second.
Adam McKee.
Commissioner Clark,
Aye.
Commissioner Thorne,
Aye.
Commissioner Jordan,
Aye.
Commissioner Hawkins,
Aye.
Commissioner Skeen.
Aye.
All righty. BJ, we got some new business here. First item would be a request for a final plat approval for the Nesbitt Industrial Park subdivision, Phase 13, 3 lots, 2.97 acres located south of Nesbitt Road at the southern terminus of Nesbitt Drive in Section 25, Township 2 South, Range 8 West.
All righty. This is just another successive phase of that industrial park in the Nesbitt area. Basically, this involves 3 lots. Lot 1 consists of 0.83 acres, Lot 2, 0.96 acres, and Lot 3, 1.18 acres. This will extend Nesbitt Drive as well as Braemont Drive. And all 3 of these lots are currently vacant, have access to centralized water and sewer services, and have direct access to either Nesbitt Drive or Braemont Drive. As proposed, all 3 lots meet or exceed all the development requirements of the M1 Light Industrial District. Of course, and you probably noted in your staff report that the last time we looked at this particular industrial subdivision, we discovered that the applicants had submitted a plat that incorrectly identified that particular phase as 11 when it should have been 10. Well, they've continued to carry on this particular problem with the phases. In this particular case, the request for final plat approval for this particular phase, it's identified as phase 12, but it's actually phase 11. This is, I'm sorry, this one is shown as phase 13 and should actually be phase 12. That's the next item on the agenda, that's phase 12 and should be phase 11. So basically, everything you've got on the agenda tonight needs to be backed up a phase number. Basically, we have for your consideration a proposed motion. Essentially, item number 1 identifies issues with the plat. You know, of course, the first one we talked about, which is the phase number. We need to revise it from preliminary plat in the title block to read final plat. We need to include in the title block of the plat the total acreage included in the plat. We need to coordinate with DeSoto County 911 to ensure that the proposed Braemont Drive street name does not duplicate the name of an already existing street. We need to revise the owners and mortgagee certificates to use our current wording concerning the dedication of right-of-way and easements. And we need to revise the plat to reflect the fact that there's a 10-foot wide utility easement on all rear property lines. That is a requirement of the county, not a requirement of the city, that you have 5 feet on the back. You know, the city requires 10 feet on the back. So that needs to be corrected. Outside of those items, the remaining conditions of approval are our standard subdivision conditions, and that's my report unless we have any questions from the commission.
Any questions or comments for Mr. Page? Thank you, Mr. Page. Will the applicant please come forward, stating your name and address?
Don Hoosier, 4555 Spring Meadow Wave South.
Any questions for Mr. Leisure?
No questions?
No questions, man, you got off easy. Is there anyone here for or against this application? Please come forward, stating your name and address. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to grant final plat approval for Phase 12 of the Nesbit Industrial Park subdivision, 3 lots, 2.97 acres, located at the southern terminus of Nesbit Drive, south of Nesbit Road, west of US Highway 51 and east of Gwynn Road, in Section 25, Township 2 South, Range 8 West, based upon a finding that the submitted final plat generally conforms to the requirements of the city's codes and ordinances, subject to the conditions set forth in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Clark?
Aye.
Commissioner Thorn?
Aye.
Commissioner Jordan?
Aye.
Commissioner Hawkins?
Aye.
Commissioner Skeen?
Aye.
Motion carries. Mr. Page, item number 2, request for a final plat approval for the Nesbit Industrial Park subdivision, Phase 12, lot 2.74 acres located south of Nesbit Road at the southern terminus of Nesbit Drive in Section 25, Township 2 South, Range 8 West.
All righty. This, of course, is a one-lot subdivision. And this one is on Braemont Drive as opposed to Nesbit Drive. It's consists of 2.74 acres, again, currently vacant, has access to centralized water and sewer services, and has direct access from Braemont Drive, as I mentioned. And as proposed, it meets or exceeds all development requirements of the M1 Light Industrial District. As I noted in my earlier staff report, that, you know, basically the phase number needs to be corrected. Essentially, without taking the time to read all of them, the proposed conditions of approval are exactly the same for this plat as it was for the previous one. There's nothing different or involved here other than the same conditions with the other plat. That's my report, unless anyone has any questions.
Any questions or comments for Mr. Page? Thank you, Mr. Page. Applicant, please come forward, stating your name and address.
Don Luzier, 4555 Spring Meadow Way South, Olive Branch, Mississippi.
Any questions or comments for Mr. Luzier?
So the main concern is the wrong phase. We need to correct that, correct?
It's noted on here, but yeah.
We'll get you a copy of the
Okay. You know I don't hear well.
comments. We'll get you copies.
Okay.
I think there was an issue with setbacks too.
Yeah, it was,
The setback.
Well, I think the setbacks are okay. It's primarily
We
the,
just-
The utility.
Yeah,
lots
the
of-
utility.
note on there for the rear yard setback.
Yeah, we have to change that.
Setbacks.
It's listed as 5-foot setback on the rear.
Okay.
The utility easement is a 10-foot. It's in here.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone here for or against this application? Please come forward, stating your name and address. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to grant final plat approval for Phase 11 of the Nesbitt Industrial Park subdivision, one lot, 2.74 acres, located at the southern terminus of Nesbitt Drive, south of Nesbitt Road, west of US Highway 51, and east of Wynn Road, in Section 25, Township 2 South, Range 8 West, based upon a finding that the submitted plat, final plat, generally conforms to the requirements of the city's codes and ordinance. It's subject to the conditions set forth in 1 through 10.
Do I have a second? Yep.
Commissioner Clark?
Aye.
Commissioner Thorne?
Aye.
Commissioner Jordan?
Aye.
Commissioner Brembalo?
Aye.
Commissioner Hawkins?
Aye.
Commissioner Skeen?
Aye.
Motion carries. All right, Mr. Page, we got a request on item number 3 for final plat approval for the Nesbitt, request for final plat approval for the Jerry White subdivision, 2 lots, 1.523 acres located on the northeast corner of Mount Pleasant Road and Riley Street in Section 7, Township 3 South, Range 7 West.
all righty. Now, I handed out to everybody a copy of the actual plat for this subdivision. I might have missed you, Mr.
I got
Barlow.
one.
Did you get one? Okay. Essentially, this is a 2-lot subdivision. It's right on the corner of Riley Street and Mount Pleasant. Lot 1 will consist of .723 acres. Lot 2 will consist of 0.8 acres. It's currently zoned R12, so these lots are, significantly larger than the 12,000 square foot minimum lot size. In fact, both of the lots are more than twice the size of the minimum lot size for R12. Basically, Lot 2 contains frontage along Riley Street and currently consists of one single-family residential structure, while Lot 1 is the lot that's right on the corner and is currently vacant. We have listed for you the setbacks for the R12 district, and pretty much as big as the lots are, those setbacks aren't going to be any problem, to meet relative to this development. Under the proposed motion, the title block, we need to add the zoning district and the number of lots to be subdivided. In the title block, we need to replace preliminary plat with final plat. We need to revise Mount Pleasant Street to read Mount Pleasant Road. We need to show the right-of-way along Mount Pleasant and Riley Street, 10 feet behind the curb. We need to reflect a 30-degree radius at Mount Pleasant Road and Riley Street. And we need to remove from Lot 2 the outline of the driveway and the home house structure. And I would note on that, you know, we like to see that information on preliminary plats, you know, because we always want to be sure where we're looking at an existing structure that it does in fact meet the setbacks, you know, and that by dividing the property, we're not somehow creating a violation, all right? But when we get to the final plat and get prepared to record, for whatever reason, the Chancery Court Clerk's Office doesn't like to see that information on the plat that will actually be recorded, okay? So that's why we're recommending to take that off here, not because they did anything wrong, but because, you know, we don't want to take the plat over there and have the Chancery Court Clerk's Office kick it back. Let's see here, revise the setback notes and setbacks shown on the lots to front yard 25, side yard 15 total, and the street yard 15 feet, and rear yard 20 feet. We need to show on the plat the location of all survey monuments. We need to add the mortgagee certificate if relevant. You know, basically, it doesn't have a mortgagee certificate on it, and if they don't have a mortgagee on the property, that's fine. But if they do have a mortgagee on the property, it needs to be on there, because the mortgagee needs to agree to, you know, the division of the property as much as the actual property owner, because they have an ownership interest, obviously. We need to revise the owner's certificates to dedicate the right-of-way for the roads and utility easements using our current wording. And finally, we need to revise the plat to reflect the 10-foot wide utility easement along the rear property line rather than 5 feet. Then the remainder of the conditions are our standard subdivision conditions. That's my report, unless anyone has any questions.
Any questions or comments for Mr. Page? Thank you, Mr. Page. Will the applicant please come forward stating your name and address?
I don't think they're here.
Okay.
Do you know what they're planning on putting there?
Well, it's zoned residential, so it's got to be a house.
Like what type of, like, are they gonna put like townhomes here? I mean,
Well, no, R12 is single family,
okay.
okay? It wouldn't allow a townhouse development. You know, you'd have to rezone it, which means it would have to come back here and to the board before that could ever happen. You know, I guess it could wind up being a small church perhaps, you know, or some other, you know, use that you would normally find in a single-family subdivision, you know, type area. But it can't be commercial, obviously. It can't be any kind of high-density residential, you know, like townhomes or apartments or anything like that, because they're not allowed in that zone. So, you know, and as I said, for an R12, you know, the lots are substantially bigger than what you would normally find, so.
That's why it seemed odd. I
Yeah.
thought they might put something else other than just that one house.
Maybe somebody wants to build a big house.
Do we, are there any requirements or specifications on where they can put the driveway, or how the driveway would be specified? I mean, it's a busy corner, at least between 7:30 and 8.
That's right on that school entry, Riley Street.
Generally speaking, when I get that question, I tell them they need to talk to the city engineer. You know, all I can tell you is we don't, you know, have much of anything to say about it. You know, in terms of the city's design standards ordinance, there are provisions in there as it regards commercial development, you know, that requires the driveway to be at least 75 feet away from the corner, you know, from like.
With this being a subdivision split, now that lot will now be a subdivision, and then if they want to build a house, would they not have to bring that final plan before us, before they built a house there? Or no?
Well, this is the final plan. essentially, the subdivision approval is just exactly that. You're approving the lots, in terms of, like how big the houses are, or what they look like, or anything like that. Unless you're dealing with a planned district like a PUD, that typically is not something that we can get into, okay? In a planned district, you're basically creating regulations for that development, okay? And so you can get into those kind of issues in a planned district. But in a standard zoning, which is what this is, if they meet the requirements of the ordinance, you can't really say no.
Before they build the house, something becomes to planning, like a plot plan and a foundation survey, and
Right, as part of the
But does it
building
come to
permit
us?
application, it doesn't come to the planning commission.
Right.
No, it
does
comes to
come-
your office. though.
Yeah.
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 I knew that part. I just
Okay.
didn't
Yeah,
think it
I
was-
mean, we have to certify, of course, besides certifying, that they conform to the building code,
Right.
obviously. We also look at those plot plans to make sure that they are in fact meeting the setbacks, in the zoning ordinance, and are meeting any other requirements that come into play. But I'm pretty
And that's
sure,
when you would, that would answer Mr. George's question, and that's when you would
well, what I'm
discuss
saying is,
about driveway
Kristen,
entrances and things like that.
if I'm correct, I don't believe we have any requirements that specify where a person's driveway can be, do we? Yeah.
If there's a question or concern that we see, we might ask Joe Frank, but as far as typically, no.
One of the things to kind of keep in mind, on anything, not just, what we're talking about here, but, on any situation, unless the city has an ordinance that says you have to do something this way, there's no violation if they don't do it that way. If we don't have a regulation that says, that the driveway's got to be X number of feet from the corner, or, has to be approved by Joe Frank or whatever, the fact that they don't do that is not a violation because there's no rule that they're breaking.
So essentially, they could shoot a driveway right off the corner, right up in there. And we don't have an ordinance that they can't
I'm
do
not
that.
saying that they couldn't. I mean, there might be a wrestling match go on about that. Obviously, when we look at driveways, we're gonna look at things like visibility, in terms of, particularly, just as an example, we haven't got into it here in this planning commission, but, when I was working in Olive Branch, from time to time, we'd have people come in and they wanted to get variances on, like, how close a fence could come to the street, or an expansion of their house, one direction or another. And one of the issues that the city's Board of Adjustment always looked at was, what's the visibility up and down the street? Are people gonna be able to back out of their driveway and see oncoming traffic, and is oncoming traffic gonna be able to see them? So obviously, I think there's a certain amount of common sense that comes into play just in looking at the issuance of permits. But at the same time, I will tell you that, without specific regulation, if somebody, just wanted to put their foot down and say, no, I'm not gonna do that, it could be a little tough.
We do have curb cutting permits, but that doesn't necessarily look at where the driveway is. It more or less makes sure you're not cutting into any storm drains or anything like that. But in this case, with a curb existing, I guess we would need to look at the curb cut on it. But we couldn't really tell them where they could put the driveway.
But as far as we know, there's no plans to put anything there right now. They're just splitting the subdivision.
I've spoken with the owner several times, and I think they have someone that they're gonna sell the lot to build a home, but there's no guarantee on that.
Sure.
Would help if he was here. Would help if he was here. He could
Right.
tell us. Just saying.
Just saying.
Well, being there's not an applicant in attendance, do we have anyone here for or against this application? And do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion. Make a motion to grant final plat approval for Jerry White subdivision. 2 lots, 1.52 acres located at the northeast corner of Mount Pleasant Road and Riley Street in Section 7, Township 3 South, Range 7 West, based upon a finding that the submitted final plat generally conforms to the requirements of the city's codes and ordinances, subject to conditions 1 through 10.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Clark,
Aye.
Commissioner Thorne,
Aye.
Commissioner Jordan,
Aye.
Commissioner Brumbelow,
Aye.
Commissioner Hawkins, Commissioner Skeen.
Aye.
Motion to approve carries.
Monuments.
Plat location of all survey monuments.
All righty, item number 4, request for a design review variance to waive the requirement to provide a 5-foot wide sidewalk along the east side of US Highway 51, the south side of Christopher Drive, and the north side of License Drive on a 15-acre tract in Section 24, Township 2 South, Range 8 West, zoned C2, Highway Commercial District.
All right, excuse me, all right. Let me, get here. Okay. You may recall, a few months back, we reviewed a number of variances relating to the energy project. One of the variances that Entergy requested was to not build sidewalks on any of the 3 street frontages of the property. It has frontage on License Drive, Highway 51, and Christopher Drive. Basically, the Planning Commission denied that variance, so they're under a requirement to put in those sidewalks. The way the property is set up, and, I've provided you with some drawings that reflect this, and this is not an uncommon situation. Obviously, the right-of-way on US 51 is being a state highway, that is under the jurisdiction of the Department of Transportation. It is not uncommon to find that where the highway, where any state highway intersects a local road, that the highway department will purchase a right-of-way a certain amount of distance up that intersection so that they control how traffic comes into the state highway. Okay. Basically, the applicant has approached the highway department because, anytime you make any kind of improvement to the highway, you have to have their permission. It's their right-of-way. You have to get a permit from them. In this particular case, the applicant approached the highway department about the placement of this sidewalk along the edge of the right-of-way, which was what was shown in their original drawings. And the highway department has come back and said, no, we're not going to let you put that sidewalk there. So basically, the applicant is requesting a variance, again, to not place the sidewalks at least within the area that's encompassed by the state highway right-of-way. That's kind of the long and the short of it. I suggested to the applicant that they consider placing the sidewalk on their property. There appears to be room to do that without interfering with any of the improvements, retaining basins and so forth, that they are proposing to build on their property. It doesn't look like that placing the sidewalk on their property would have any kind of issue, I suggested that they consider dedicating a sidewalk easement, to the city, so that the city could maintain the sidewalk. And the same kind of fashion that we have utility easements, for the location of city water and sewer improvements. The applicant came back and said that Entergy's attorneys were of the opinion that they did not want to do that because they felt it would create liability for Entergy by having the sidewalk on their property. I took that information to the city attorney, Steve Pittman. He came, after researching the matter, he came back to me and said that doing so, placing the sidewalk on the Entergy property would not create any liability for Entergy at all. And that was not a legitimate argument. So you have, the background on the information. You have the applicant's response to the 4 criteria that are required for approval of a variance, as well as the staff comments on those 4 criteria. You have within your staff report a motion, a proposed motion that would approve the variance, as well as a proposed motion that would deny the variance, with appropriate findings for both of those proposed motions. Of course, as I always mention, you have the ability to table the request if you feel like there's information that you do not have, or if you feel like you need more time to consider it. So that's my report, unless anyone has any questions.
Do you know why MDOT told them they couldn't put the sidewalk where the commission had originally told them? Are they planning on widening that street?
Well, I have had discussions with MDOT in the past. They're not very revealing in terms of my conversations with them. I have certain theories. I know that MDOT, I don't know whether you'd call it a regulation or a policy, but basically, if there's an existing sidewalk, and as a result of MDOT widening a road or otherwise improving a road, they have to remove the existing sidewalk, they are under some kind of obligation to put it back. Okay? So, that's one reason why they don't want sidewalks in their right-of-way. Another question, becomes one of maintenance. If it's in their right-of-way, does it become their responsibility to maintain, because it's in their right-of-way? But I can't sit here and bona fidely tell you those are the reasons. But, most of the time when you see issues of people not wanting to do things, whether it's individuals or agencies like MDOT, it all comes back to money some way or another, not wanting to spend it one way or another. So, that's all I can tell you, Mr. Clark. I hope that's sufficient.
That's what I figured the answer was. They wouldn't tell.
Just to clarify, so in March, the design variance was denied. They didn't like that answer, they went to MDOT. They got denied. And then you offered several suitable suggestions. They don't like that. And then a design variance is equal to or greater than, but yet this says design variance to waive the requirements. So that's not equal to or better than.
Well, that's one of the criteria, clearly. That's a judgment that you have to make, and whether to grant or deny any variance, design review variance.
And Commission, I too reached out to our city attorney, Steve Pittman, in regard to liabilities and stuff in regards to this, and he said he doesn't see a basis for Energy's position that easement and sidewalks will increase their liability. He says that's,
Well, you talked to.
yeah, because I was asking about the liability part of it too, and he says there
And
shouldn't be any
there is
liabilities.
suitable room inside on their property.
Yeah, if you take a look at, I've included
It's a lot of room.
in your staff report a site plan that was submitted by the applicant. And I've highlighted in yellow, you know, the portion of the sidewalk that they want to eliminate in yellow. And if you look, you know, inside their property, because the sidewalk is just outside their property. Even though there's a retention basin, you know, along the frontage of their property, there's clearly enough room between the property line and the edge of the retention basin, you know, where a sidewalk could be placed. Because we're only talking about something that's 5 foot wide.
BJ, have you heard that any businesses that been in this predicament before going and asking for possible easement from MDOT to put the sidewalk there, and or they're just, hey, they're saying no, and
They're just saying no,
yeah,
pretty
okay.
much. This is something that has really just started to come up within the past year. You know, and it's become something that I have a feeling that our mayor is going to be talking with our highway commissioner about, you know, as to, you know, why and what can be done. You know, because clearly, you know, we have, you know, 51 is a major road that runs right through the middle of town, and we can't get sidewalks on it. You know, it's clearly something that's got to be addressed, you know.
We get grant dollars to build walking trails all over the place, yet we can't put sidewalks in. I don't understand.
Right.
It does not make sense, yeah.
Well, I can tell you right now that, you know, when we go up to the MPO, you know, the Memphis Planning Organization, where we have to go through them to get federal highway dollars to improve, you know, what you might call secondary roads in the city. You know, the Federal Highway Administration, you know, beats you about the head and shoulders if you don't provide sidewalks and bike trails and things as part of your road improvement project, you know.
Yeah.
Now, I don't understand why they're not taking the same position with the state, because, you know, the state is using federal highway money to maintain 51, because it's a US highway, you know, so, I don't know, you know, it's definitely a thorny issue, and I would like to say that I hope it gets resolved, but I can't sit here and guarantee it's gonna get resolved.
Is it possible to ask Energy to pay for the sidewalk and wait for the road to be widened, which I'm assuming is the reason why they're saying no? Once the road is widened, we have that money to pay the sidewalk. Is that
Well,
possible?
I think, you know, I wish Steve were here. You know, I think it's a possibility, Mr. Clark, but at the same time, it's something that I'm not sure we can do on the fly. You know, it's something that might require adoption of a ordinance allowing that to happen. You know, I've dealt in other communities where they provide what are called fees in lieu of, you know, improvements. But typically they have an ordinance in place that, you know, sets up how that would work, you know, and basically allows that option to be available. So I don't know if it's something, you know, since we don't have one basically in place at this time, you know, I don't know that it's anything that we could do, you know, like right now.
You still don't know if Energy's gonna, I mean, MDOT's gonna let you build there, even if the road's wide. Just don't know. They could still say no.
Did you, remind me, did you say you suggested to Energy that City of Hernando would take over the maintenance and care of that sidewalk, and they didn't?
Well, you have to understand that the normal sidewalk is a public improvement. You know, it is inside this, you know, if we were talking about a non-state highway, you know, just a local street, you know, the sidewalks, like through your subdivision, for example, they are in the city's right-of-way. They're not on private property, okay? And they're considered a public improvement, just like the public street is. So they are, in fact, a city maintenance issue, okay? That's why I suggested that in placing the sidewalk on the Energy property, that they dedicate a sidewalk easement, you know, to the city, you know, which would clearly make it a public improvement and not an improvement that would be a private improvement that they would be responsible for.
And they didn't like that request?
No, that's when they came back with the liability response.
Any other questions or comments for Mr. Page? Thank you, Mr. Page. Will the applicant please come forward stating your name and address?
Hello, Gene Krager, 3221 Old Canton Road, Jackson, Mississippi.
Any questions or comments for Mr. Krager?
Other than maintenance, what's the liability issue? I mean, if you fail to maintain it, there could be a liability issue.
Yeah, there's not a maintenance issue. We were asked to provide the sidewalks, and we put those on the drawings as we were asked to do. And obviously, MDOT denied us the permit to actually construct them. And so now Entergy's being asked to put the public sidewalks on their property. And that, I think, is where Entergy's concern is.
Do you disagree that there's room to put those sidewalks?
We, not without some changes, we have grading that goes all the way up to, I don't know what drawing BJ was showing, if it was the landscape drawing, but the grading goes all the way up to the property line. We definitely would have to regrade and get the civil engineers to check that retention pond area.
You haven't been told it couldn't be done.
No, haven't asked.
So meeting in the, I'm just thinking from the negotiation, moving it inside your property, because a couple of the attorneys said there's no liability, so if we moved it onto Energy's property and then dedicate that 5 feet back to the city, that takes, you're losing 5, I mean,
That's correct.
You're losing 5 feet. But we're meeting the standards, we're meeting the ordinance, and you still get your project.
I can't speak for Entergy Legal. I'm the architect. I apologize. You're asking me to give you an answer that's above what I have.
I don't know why that wasn't an acceptable negotiation. It
ask
seems
about it.
reasonable to me.
I agree with you.
But I guess what Mr. Jordan was saying, it is possible then, just with some resurveying, re-engineering, regrading, to see if that would work.
Yes, there's definitely some cost and rework involved.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments for Mr. Krager? Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone here for or against this application? Do I have a motion?
I make a motion to deny a design review variance by Entergy Mississippi Inc. to waive the sidewalk requirements along US Highway 51, Christopher Drive, and License Drive, is identified on the submitted site plan on the subject property identified as parcel number 2086-2400.0 00015.00, a 15-acre tract on the east side of US Highway 51 between License Drive and Christopher Drive, based upon the findings set forth in A, B, C, and D.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Clark,
Aye.
Commissioner Thorne,
Aye.
Commissioner Jordan,
Aye.
Commissioner Brumbelow,
Aye.
Commissioner Hawkins, Commissioner Skeen.
Aye.
The motion to deny the application carries.
Mr. Cragen, just for your information, your applicant, your client can appeal this action of the Planning Commission to the Board of Aldermen if they wish.
Yes.
They have to submit a letter within 10 days to the city clerk's office.
All right, Mr. Page, item number 5, a request for a design review variance to waive the requirement for screening around the mechanical units located at the shop building as identified on the submitted site plan for Delta Industries, located at 3262 Industrial Drive, a 10-acre tract on the east side of Industrial Drive, south of Aden, west of McCracken Road, and east of Mount Pleasant Road extended in Section 19, Township 3 South, Range 7 West, currently zoned M2 Heavy Industrial.
Okay. You may recall, a month or so ago, we had some variances from Delta Industries, one of which was to waive the screening requirement on the batch house, which sits back from the road about 400 feet or so. This is a request, a similar request to waive the screening requirement for mechanical units associated with the shop building. And based on the site plan that was submitted, as part of the application, it appears that they're on the side of the building, and I have included that in your staff report, highlighted in yellow. Basically, that's the thrust of the request. The design standards ordinance, of course, requires that screening, and this is a request to waive that requirement. I have included in your staff report the applicant's responses to the 4 criteria required to approve a variance, as well as the staff comments on that matter. And I have included in your staff report a proposed motion to approve the variance with the appropriate findings, as well as a proposed motion to deny the variance with the proposed findings. And of course, you always have the option to table the application if you feel that you need additional information or additional time to consider the application. So that's my report, unless anyone has any questions.
Any questions or comments for Mr. Page?
Was the previous screening, when was that?
I can't remember, was it last month?
I remember that, yeah.
I kind of lose track of this stuff over time.
I remember a couple, I remember that one specifically, but I can't remember what that was.
Yeah, it was November.
That's all, November?
Yeah. I think we had like 3 or 4 variances.
Is the landscape plan that's included, is that oriented north? I'm just having a hard time.
Actually, that's more of a west, isn't it? Isn't the front of the building more westerly?
So this is south, so this is the south side of the building.
So it is oriented north?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the landscaping, I'm sorry.
Is that the very end of Industrial Drive? I mean, is there?
At the current time, yeah.
Okay, I mean, will it be extended at some point?
Oh, yeah, if you look at the aerial photograph, it's like the very first attachment after the staff report. That gives you the larger view of the surrounding property. And you can see, that basically south of the property and to the west of the property, there's some fairly substantial areas that are still available for development. So I don't think that's going to stay the end of the road very long.
They've extended it across their property and a little further, I believe.
It's 20 feet on the south side.
So the road goes in front of them now, a little bit past them.
Will it be a through road? I mean, we don't know at this point.
I have not seen any plans for this subdivision, so I don't know ultimately where this road is going. I mean, it would pretty much have to come back to McCracken, I think, if it were going to tie into anything, really. I guess it could ultimately, tie into some east-west road that would come back to Industrial Drive West as well.
I don't know, I'm just trying to look at the map to orientate myself. If there is future, that, Mr. Jordan, it looks like the industrial drive would loop all the way back around and connect back to McCracken at some point in the future.
It's the only thing I could see too.
So I'm gonna assume what you were asking then is if in that future drive, if somebody were coming off McCracken in some future and then coming in the other direction, they would,
Well, any
they would
direction.
see where this variance screening would be.
Yeah, with the visibility of this.
Coming in a
what
different,
it's-
yeah.
How visible it's gonna be.
Mr. Page, could you remind me again on what defines screening? Is that natural vegetation like trees, evergreens?
Basically, the ordinance allows, like a fence or a wall. We have also allowed, dense shrubbery. It just has to be tall enough to enclose the.
So in this case, we're talking about a building. So the screening would potentially be like evergreen or.
Could be.
That's a really big wall. Really tall fence.
Mr. Page, just for my knowledge, is there any structure or meaning with the it's almost like a cloud going around these areas. Is that for anything, or is that just to designate where we're looking for?
It's probably a question you should pose to Mr. Anderson, because,
Okay.
you know, they were on the plan that was submitted with the application, and I'm not really sure exactly,
What that is?
yeah.
Is there any other questions or comments for Mr. Page? Thank you, Mr. Page. Will the applicant please come forward, stating your name and address?
Yeah, Thomas Anderson, 3262 Industrial Drive. So, as Mr. Page said, we came with the batch house for the same issue. This is a little different. We understand that the batch house is at the back of the property. The mechanical for the shop is towards the front. We have a ground-mounted transformer. There's an AC condensing unit, and then there's the gas meter that's there at the south side of the shop. The transformer's painted to blend in. The AC unit, to the extent possible, matches the shop building. Not exactly, because we couldn't paint it, avoid the warranty, but it's as close as relatively possible. And basically, our stance is again, we're a concrete plant. What you're gonna look at when you drive by our plant is our silos in the back. You know, you're not gonna be drawn to the transformer at the ground or the AC condensing unit at the ground, even if that road were to be looped around and people were coming from the back. We've toyed with what we could put there to screen these things. Likely, we would end up having to put a wall there, and that's gonna draw your attention more because it's gonna look out of place. Because the transformer is set off from the building. So that's why we're asking for this. What were you asking?
Yeah, what I was
about?
asking, what is this? You got it in several areas. You know, to me, looking at that was a type of,
It was a revision. I believe it was a revision.
just that around there.
Yeah, so we phased the property was set into phases. I think it was 4 phases. So we did the batch house and the plant, we did the shop, and then the plan is eventually to put an office there. And I think in the revisions, that's what you're looking at there, is those revision clauses.
I think what he's referring to is what's commonly used in landscape drawings to identify shrubbery.
That's correct.
No.
That's typically used in landscape drawings to identify shrubbery, Mr. Anderson.
Well, how would we shrub around the concrete in the back of this machine?
I don't know.
That's the only reason I was asking, because if you were putting shrubbery there, that would be,
Yeah. My understanding is these were revision clouds because that was added because we didn't have that stuff. That was part of the process. Now, I was not involved on the early end, but my understanding is those are revision clouds.
gotcha.
Yeah, there's a little, see that little 2 in a triangle above each of those? It's revision 2, and down on the bottom,
see it,
revisions. Yeah.
So there was parking, and then we phased the buildings. That's why that whole building is clouded, I believe. The shop and the office, we had an office at the front. We took that out and moved it to a separate phase for a future.
There's also the large generator that's going to be put in,
Right
that you're waiting on, that will be right there in the front as well, next to those
Right
units.
behind the transformer.
Right there with those other units.
Mr. Anderson, when you said you went back and studied it,
Studied is not, don't use that word. Discussed, we'll use the word discussed.
that it would be a wall?
Potentially have to put a wall there. So I brought this to everybody's attention. So with our concrete plant, we have a hard time keeping vegetation alive. And we've landscaped and we've got vegetation out front, and our intent is to keep that. We don't like, as much as possible, we'd like to not have vegetation closer to the buildings because it's very hard for us to maintain it. So it is a possibility, and we could go that route, if we felt that it was gonna work. The size of the things we'd have to plant in here to cover the transformer and the generator, as you said, might not be feasible. Might be cheaper for us to put a wall up. And like I say, from an aesthetic standpoint, I don't know that that gains us anything. Again, because we're gonna be somebody's gonna drive by the plant, they're gonna look at either a mixer truck on the yard, or they're gonna be looking at the silos in the back. And the trucks are bright yellow.
How tall would that wall, do you think, would be?
I mean, it'd probably be 4 or 5 feet.
So not that much?
No, I mean,
From an expense.
no, it wouldn't, I mean, expense-wise, it's not gonna be that big of an expense.
So like a 5-foot, 4-foot wall?
Probably. And like I said, it's gonna be offset, it's almost gonna look like it's a small garbage bin container kind of looking thing. That's kind of what we had discussed.
And help me, what do you mean by not being able to keep vegetation alive? Because of the concrete,
Well, so we haul a bunch of things in and out, and
so it's the dust and the,
dust, sand. Sand is actually the biggest killer of vegetation. It's sand and salt and that kind of things. It gets,
not because you don't go out and sing to it or water it or.
no, we do water. We've paid good money for what's there, and I've actually paid double what it was, because the assumption is that we're gonna have to replace it, and so we locked in prices, so.
I would think if you put some sort of wall or screen ground mounted barrier there to cover those items and painted it in conjunction to, you know, if approved through the design review, but painted in conjunction to your building, you wouldn't notice it anyway, and you're kind of, you know, sufficing the city ordinances and keeping kind of what you were wanting to do, and would you know, that, I think that would probably be pretty good.
That or a couple of $10 Leland cypress over a few years, they'll grow, they're pretty hardy.
$10. You ever been?
it's good.
Obviously, yeah, but those don't cover it, right? We've got to put something in that covers it from day one, correct?
Well, yeah.
Yeah, so those are not $10.
No.
And again, we're not here, this is not about cost of actually installing it. You know, that's not a valid
I'm
reason
still,
to do that, but this is about, you know,
I'm looking at the ordinance and the requirements of a design review, or excuse me, a design variance equal to or better than is contradictory to, I want to waive the requirement and then apply it as a design variance. So you're asking for a variance, but you're saying waive it, we don't want to.
well, for this one, I'm not certain I use the terminology waive. We're just.
That's on the heading of the application.
Well, but I didn't write that.
Waive the requirement to screen.
Yeah, I'll request approval to not install the screening around the mechanic, but that's nuance. Again, when I apply the equal to or better, again, your eye is gonna be drawn to our cement silos in the back and our fly ash silo. So that's why I'm coming to equal to, is you're not gonna see this, likely, no matter what we do, you probably won't see it. So you're probably right, is that if we put something there, it's not gonna stand out anymore, because you're not gonna look at it regardless. You're gonna be looking at the other mechanical equipment that's not going to be hidden, or the cell tower right next to us.
It's very industrial in that whole part of town.
Right.
I mean, if we're talking about even a generator or a AC unit, I just,
Yeah,
I
diesel
don't-
tank.
I don't think that any of those things would draw an eye compared to the other things that are in this part of town.
And there's quite a bit of landscaping out towards the street.
Correct.
And that's what I was trying to get, I couldn't get a good feel for it, where it was and how it was worded.
What kind of, is that trees or what is that out by the street?
There's trees by the street, and
What's the plan there, do you know?
what's the plan?
Like, is it deciduous trees or evergreens or?
They're not ever, they're deciduous. You'll have to forgive me.
It's all right.
Whatever's on the drawings, that's what's out there. I don't know exactly. I'm not very good with that kind of stuff. If I was out there to touch them, they'd probably die today.
Like great
But
marbles.
there are trees by the road. We've got bushes covering the parking in the front.
No, it says right here, deciduous trees.
There you go.
New large deciduous tree.
Any other questions or comments for Mr. Anderson?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Is there anyone here for or against this application? Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve design review variance to waive the requirements to screen ground-mounted mechanical units at the shop building on Delta Industries site 3262 Industrial Drive, parcel number 3074-19070-00001.00, a 10-acre parcel located on the east side of Industrial Drive, south of Vaden Drive, west of McCracken Road, and east of Mount Pleasant Road, extended in Section 19, Township 3 South, Range 7 West, for Thomas Anderson, representing Delta Industries. The owner of the property is reflected on the plan submitted in their application based on the following findings, A through D.
Is there a second?
Commissioner Clark?
Aye.
Commissioner Thorne?
Aye.
Commissioner Jordan?
Nay.
Commissioner Brumbelow?
Nay.
Commissioner Hawkins?
Aye.
Commissioner Skeen?
Nay.
Commissioner Carter?
Nay. So the motion to approve is denied. Or didn't pass, excuse me.
You could say it failed.
Failed, there you go, failed.
I believe at this point, you would need to follow up with someone making a motion to deny the variance.
Okay. All right, is there a motion to deny this application?
I'll make a motion to deny a design review variance to waive the requirements to screen ground-mounted mechanical units at the shop building on Delta Industries site at 3262 Industrial Drive, parcel number 3074-1907.0000001.00, a 10-acre parcel located on the east side of Industrial Drive, south of Vaden Drive, west of McCracken Road, and east of Mount Pleasant Road, extended in Section 19, Township 3 South, Range 7 West, for Thomas Anderson, representing Delta Industries, the owner of the property, as reflected on the plan submitted in their application based upon findings A through D.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Clark?
Nay.
Commissioner Thorne?
A. Aye, sorry.
Commissioner Jordan?
Aye.
Commissioner Brumbelow?
Aye.
Commissioner Hawkins?
Nay.
Commissioner Skeen?
Aye.
Ayes have it, so the motion carries to deny this application. Mr. Page, we got item number 6, which is a request for a design review variance to allow the location of safety bollards painted a bright safety yellow as identified on the submitted site plan for Delta Industries located at 3262 Industrial Drive, 10-acre tract on the east side of Industrial Drive, south of Vaden Drive, west of McCracken Road, and east of Mount Pleasant Road, extended in Section 19, Township 3 South, Range 7 West, currently zoned M2 Heavy Industrial.
Alrighty, this is a fairly common variance, it seems. We've had two others fairly recently, so it's something that the commission is rather familiar with. They have pipe bollards, protecting buildings and equipment and so forth, and they have, large vehicles, trundling about the property. And going to and from the shop and so forth, and so that they want to be sure that the bollards are visible so that people don't run into them. And so, unfortunately, our design review ordinance does not allow the use of bright primary colors. And so the variance is being requested to allow the use of yellow for these specific purposes. Again, you have the applicant's responses to the 4 criteria, as well as the staff responses. You have a proposed motion to approve with the appropriate findings, as well as a proposed motion to deny with appropriate findings, and you always have the option of tabling it, of course, if you feel you need additional time to consider it or additional information. And that's my report, unless anyone has any questions.
Any questions or comments for Mr. Page? And Commission, I'll just remind you, one likeness we had of recent was Nateo, of the same, pretty much the same structure, so. If y'all remember that one, I think that was about 2 meetings ago or so. Thank you, Mr. Page. Will the applicant please come forward, state your name and address?
Thomas Anderson, 3262 Industrial Drive. So for this one, like you said, pipe bollard, so OSHA has a standard that we were required to meet, and it actually 1910.144 specifically calls the color out. That's the color we use, color we use everywhere, color everybody over there uses for bollards. I will say that we did, in the front, around the fire hydrants that were not in our original designs, the fire department asked us to put bollards around those, as those are not, those are actually for protection. There's no driving over there. We did paint those a more palatable color. I can't remember what it was, but it was within the design, the colors that were requested. And I will say, we didn't request early on anything about this because our reading of the design standards does not specifically prohibit the use of colored bollards. We read it as you can't use this as a predominant color on the building. So when it was brought to our attention, that was my stance on it. Obviously I'm here, so we're bringing that up, but that's why it wasn't actually asked for early on.
Any questions or comments for Mr. Anderson? Thank you. Is there anyone here for or against this application? Please come forward, state your name and address. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve a design review variance to waive the requirements to allow the use of bright primary colors, yellow on metal safety bollards on the Delta Industries site at 3262 Industrial Drive, parcel 3074-1907, 0.00001.00, a 10-acre parcel located on the east side of Industrial Drive, south of Aden Drive, west of McCracken Road, and east of Mount Pleasant Road extended in Section 19, Township 3 South, Range 7 West, for Thomas Anderson, representing Delta Industries. The owner of the property is reflected on the plan submitted in their application based upon findings A through D.
Keith.
Commissioner Clark?
Aye.
Commissioner Thorn?
Aye.
Commissioner Jordan?
Aye.
Commissioner Brumbelow?
Aye.
Commissioner Hawkins?
Aye.
Commissioner Skeen?
Aye.
The motion to approve the item carries. Mr. Page, item number 7, a request for a design review variance to waive the requirement for providing grass or other ground cover around the site, allowing the site to remain as dirt and crushed concrete as identified on the submitted site plan for Delta Industries. Located at 3262 Industrial Drive, a 10-acre tract on the east side of Industrial Drive, south of Aden Drive, west of McCracken Road, and east of Mount Pleasant Road extended in Section 19, Township 3 South, Range 7 West, currently zoned M2.
Okay. Basically, you'll recall last month, we had a variance request to waive the requirements to pave access roads and parking basically beyond what has already been paved. Typically, where you have paved access roads, paved parking areas, the areas around those are typically, have ground cover of some kind. In this particular case, The application requested waiving the provision of ground cover as required by the ordinance, and allowing the use of crushed concrete as the Delta Industries site is currently finished. So that's my understanding of the request. In terms of, I have heard fairly recently that it may not be their intent to, waive it throughout the site, that there may be specific areas that they're requesting that it be waived. I'm not sure. The application was very general in its statement, and the site plan which we received is the same site plan we received on all the applications, so it didn't really highlight any particular area over another as to what, might be paved or not paved. In addition to that, we have, of course, the Planning Commission's denial of the variance on paving, waiving the paving from last month's meeting, has been appealed to the Board of Aldermen. That'll be heard next Tuesday night. So, that's kind of out there as well. So, that's kind of all I can tell you as far as what I know about the request. The staff report includes the applicant's response to the 4 criteria, as well as the staff comments. And you have proposed motions to approve and deny with the appropriate findings, and you always have the option to table it if you feel like you need additional time to consider it, or if you need additional information. So that's my report, unless anyone has any questions.
So, Mr. Page, with them, the alderman not hearing our initial denial of the paving variance, this almost makes no sense to kind of go along with that until we, if we approve this and they approve crushed concrete and deny our motion or override our motion, I guess we're kind of caught in something, that's what.
Well, it's one of those things where, I guess part of my issue with the paving situation is that, without paving, you don't know where trucks are going to drive and not drive, where trucks are going to park and not park. If it's just a big, open, crushed rock property, they can basically drive anywhere, park anywhere, and that may be the intention, but at the same time, if you don't know where the parking areas and traffic routes are going to be, the traffic ways, then how do you know what's not going to be paved? What's going to be grass or not grass? And I appreciate what Mr. Anderson said on one of the previous applications, about finding it difficult to keep landscaping and things alive. But I have to say, Mr. Anderson, and this is certainly not anything aimed at you personally, but sounds to me what that says is that Delta Industries need to take a hard look at their operating procedures, and that the way you conduct business that causes that situation to exist, may be a problem you need to address. But, I don't know what to tell you. Like I said, I had heard just today that they might not be requesting this variance for the entire whole property as it's currently shown in the photographs that we took out there. But I don't know that because the application didn't specify that. The terms of the responses to the 4 criteria, it didn't really say anything about this area versus that area. You know, and like I said, the site plan doesn't show any particular area where they would expect, you know, to have grass or not have grass. You know, so I can only assume that it's for the whole area. I don't know if that really answers your question. You know, but I understand your dilemma, you know, that if the paving variance is overturned by the board, you know, does this request almost become moot in a sense?
Any other questions or comments from Mr. Page? Thank you, Mr. Page. Will the applicant please come forward? State your name and address.
Yeah, Thomas Anderson, 3262 Industrial Drive. So this application is in response to a comment for our permit for the truck shop. We got a comment that stated grounds cannot be predominantly gravel/crushed limestone, and that was the extent of the comment. The drawings show that we intend for the entire site, it's not allocated to landscaping in the front to be covered in crushed concrete or limestone. Since I was here last time, we have actually, so when we buy aggregates, when we get to a certain threshold, we get significant discounts on purchasing. So we actually hit that threshold this year, and we've actually covered the entire site in limestone. I'm guessing that's what you're talking about. But we have no intention to pave anything beyond what's shown on the drawing. So we've covered the site in limestone, so it is more stable than it was with the pictures you guys saw last month. But my request for this one is to remove this as a tracking item from this permit and just carry the issue that was discussed and denied by your board last time, and let Delta carry that on with the batch house and move forward with the truck shop without this, basically the same comment on both permits. Unless I'm reading the comment incorrectly.
Can I address that? I'm sorry, can I address that?
Sure.
Okay, I did the inspection, and what this was in regards to was the previous variance that you heard was for the batch house. That was for the general paving of the batch house and that area where all of the trucks were going to be driving on, parking, all that. What this was addressing was more or less where, if you looked on the, let's see, I know it's on the one where the screening, the last page. If you look up here on the building, this part right here is a future office. That was originally on the plan, and then they did some revisions and took this office area out. All of this area and over here is all what he's talking about is crushed limestone.
No, that's
All
actually all correct.
Well, all in here, and it wasn't when I was out
What
there.
area are we talking about here?
Like all over here in this area and in the front was not grass. That was all mud in this area when I was out there.
Right, all
And I
of
was-
this, all of that is grass.
Okay.
Where the office, the future office is going.
Okay,
is
well,
all single-
if that is the case, it wasn't when I did the inspection, and I was told that they had no intentions of putting any other ground covering out other than crushed limestone or paving. I mean, or,
That's a misunderstanding, because all of that is seeded in driveway.
okay.
And it's actually better than the sod that was put up.
But that's where the,
Because if that's what
The
this
comment
comment
was.
was for, then you can come back out and check it, if that's what this was for. But again, our reading of it, when I asked, it was about the whole site being covered in gravel, crushed concrete and gravel.
well, yes, it does address that as well, but that was the main issue that I was looking at on that inspection.
Where's the limestone at now? I didn't understand you. Where'd y'all put limestone?
Because,
On top of the crushed concrete?
well, we skimmed it a couple of inches and we've covered everything in limestone, except for the retention pond, obviously, and then what's concrete. Because as I said, we drive all over the site. The trucks go everywhere, we have ag haulers coming, we have a significant traffic pattern in and out, and we have a loader that comes in and moves everywhere, the trucks back in and drive. So the entire site is driven by vehicles.
It just seems like there's a miscommunication between, I'm still cloudy on what's paved versus not paved. And going back to Mr. Carter's question, is that we've got this in front of us, but yet there's something pending next week, generally on the same topic. So, I'm not clear, what are we talking about in terms of ground covering and where and what? And the plans don't really show a whole lot.
Well, so this is the thing, the reason they don't show a whole lot, because there's an arrow that shows that everything that's not paved is crushed concrete. So if you go to the drawing that shows the landscape.
That's not in this application. That's the only drawing I've got on this application. You're talking about this other one from,
Yeah, see this drawing right here, all this yellow?
all the yellow is
All
crushed
that
concrete.
yellow is
That's-
limestone.
Okay.
That's why there's not a lot of delineation, because it is this 8.5 acres of free space.
I think part of the misconception or cloudiness, as Commissioner Thorne stated, is this is being looked at as the 10-acre tract, and those areas affected not just around your building or anything. So that's what we're voting on tonight, is the 10-acre tract and whole, according to what this item states. I don't see a specific area.
Well, and that's one thing I want to be very clear about here, you know. I can only work off what I get from the applicant, you know, and if the description of what they're requesting is general in nature, and the backup materials that they submit is general in nature, that's all I can tell you. I mean, that's
Just so
all
I can
got.
catch up,
I mean, you
so-
know, you know, I get stuff and I read it and I look at it and it looks to me like we're talking about the whole site.
Exactly.
But if we're not talking about the whole site, I don't know that because that's not been presented to me.
Well, my understanding is we are talking about the whole site.
So the whole
And again,
site,
and I'm responding to a comment that we got from the planning committee.
That was on an inspection for the shop.
Correct.
so what's in front of the alderman next week, this same 10-acre tract of land?
Correct.
To pave it instead of crushed limestone?
To waive the requirement to pay,
Yeah,
To
that's
waive
right.
the requirement of paving.
which we denied
Right,
the
right.
waiver.
So this one, what we're looking at tonight almost seems in contradiction of what's going up Tuesday.
But we're also voting on, as Mr. Pave stated, a generalization of the 10-acre tract, not
Yeah.
2.3 acres of the 10-acre tract to be under this in specific or something. And that's,
Correct. And we will take some of the blame in this, and when, I don't know if blame is the right word, but responsibility. Because when we chopped up the phasing of the site between the shop and the batch house, it was delineated just like that shop and batch house, and there was no delineation on what constituted that other than the buildings. And there's infrastructure that supports that. And we talked about that last month where we should have delineated parking in certain areas that were allocated for the batch house and allocated, so there is a little bit of haziness on there, but what I'm requesting with this is that right now I'm carrying the same comment on both permits. And it's going to get resolved in that one because, in the batch house, because it came first. So I don't want to have to resolve it again for the same issue.
Okay, take a stab at this. It sounds to me, you know, Mr. Anderson, you feel free to tell me I'm wrong.
I think we're going to listen to it.
Okay, but it's, and I think this is what Mr. Thorne's getting to, I think, is the fact that the variance we heard in November and denied wasn't for any specific area. It was for the whole site.
That's
If you were
right.
gonna drive on it, if you were gonna park on it, it had to be paved. That's what the ordinance required. Okay? So, we denied that variance. That's going to the Board of Aldermen on Tuesday. If they overturn it, then the whole site don't have to be paved. Okay? So it almost sounds like this application is the same
It is.
as the other one.
I am trying to clear a comment to get my permit completed. And this is the
Yeah, this-
path to clear that comment.
This application seems moot to that point.
If the board overturns it, it is certainly.
At this point, I'm motioning to table this one until after that, so we can see what the results of that one is, and then come back and revisit this. This is, I'm not,
we were tabling it, fix it though? I mean,
So this is the thing, is if it gets tabled, can the comment be resolved without going to this board?
What was it-
'Cause
what
you can
comment are we
withdraw a
talking about
comment
again?
From the.
It won't be withdrawn, but it will be resolved in the variance. If they overturn the variance denial,
Then it's
it will be
resolved.
resolved. But you have to understand, we had to make comments on each permit that was pulled for each inspection. So that's where the
Okay.
comments came on both permits, because they were
So.
same
whatever
lot,
the
but two
resolution
different
is on
buildings.
that- In that path, if we get approval that way.
Yes,
We
it
can
will.
take that approval and apply it to this.
Yes,
permit.
if I'm understanding
And I'm
correctly,
fine
that
with that.
the last month's variance will cover the entire site, correct, BJ? So that would cover both the shop and the batch.
Well, let me put it this way. Yes, it will, but I hasten to remind everyone, I'm not gonna sit here and guarantee that the board's gonna overturn it,
That's right.
right.
I mean, it's just as possible that the board will uphold the planning commission's
Well-
denial of the variance.
Either way,
Which
whatever
means
decision
you
they
gotta-
make
Right.
will
The
cover the
resolution
entire
can be
site.
resolved.
I mean, it'll be resolved one way or
Yes.
the other.
Well, not necessarily.
What do we do with this one in the meantime, though?
Well,
I don't think you can fix this though, because it's a 10-acre, ask for a full 10 acre
That's right.
grass. So, I mean, I think we deny this with the intention of it being resolved by the Board of Aldermen, whenever the Board of Aldermen comes up. I mean, I think
I
that's,
prefer it be tabled. I hate to go back into it.
well, then at some point, what do we do? Would you withdraw the application?
Yeah.
He withdraws it afterwards?
I would think so. I mean,
Because all I need is resolution of the comment. I don't necessarily need the variance approved or denied.
Well, the table isn't resolving the comment, it's just,
Well, but the
The next
resolution
one,
of the other
next
will
week.
resolve the comment. Either way.
Just tonight, what's presented in front of us is for the entirety of the 10-acre tract. And if we, approve this variance,
we're in direct contradiction of the other one.
maybe.
Unless you
And
know
then-
that we,
And then if they,
well, you'd
Approve
be
it
in
pending
direct
outcome of
contra,
that.
you'd be in direct contravention of what the planning commission did
that's right.
previously.
That's right.
Yeah, I agree with that.
It's not specified on exactly what they're wanting to alleviate, in my opinion, in this item. It's for the entirety of the whole tract. And we go back to, we've got an item that's presented just like that, that may change the whole direction of this one.
I wasn't here for that last meeting, so I'm a little bit not completely caught up. But, I mean, this specific request is requesting approval of design variance to waive the provision of ground cover by the ordinance, thereby allowing, I mean, this is for landscaped areas, right? I mean, this is not, you want to use crushed concrete over everything, and you don't want to have any landscaped
So-
areas. I mean, that's the way this reads to
again,
me.
The way that was written doesn't have anything to do with what I actually submitted. The language included in that doesn't match anything that I was given.
Yeah, so I mean, it's just,
What
to
I
me, this is
requested
areas
approval to not
adjacent to
change on
streets and walkways. It says areas adjacent to streets and pedestrian walkways shall have grass or vegetative cover. So, right, I mean, this is about landscaped areas, not the whole parking lot.
Well, the thing you gotta look at, it's one of those things that, I hate to get involved in, but, if the property is paved and you have defined traffic ways through the site, you have defined areas where the concrete trucks are going to be parked or where they're going to be driven, then the requirement that there be, ground cover adjacent to, the streets and parking areas comes into play. On the other hand, if the board overturns the planning commission's, denial from last month, then, there are no defined streets or parking areas. It's just a big gravel area. So I would agree that the ground cover issue doesn't come into play.
But this
that's
is,
the point I was
the
trying to make is-
10-acre site. I mean, this would, if we pass this, you don't have to do anything out by the road, in front of the building, nothing.
Well, all that's already been done.
Yeah, it says, waive the provision, thereby allowing the use of crushed concrete over the entire Delta Industries site as currently finished, is what you mentioned, you'd already put the limestone in, right? So essentially, it's like voting on agreeing with what they've already done with limestone. And then Tuesday night is determining whether or not you gotta put pavement over your limestone.
And again, we initially denied that variance for crushed concrete with paving. So that's what this is asking, like Mr. Page is saying, it's almost, we're wanting to refer to landscaping and stuff, ground cover, as it's stated, but it's still, they're asking for crushed concrete over the entire area. And we don't know how that's gonna turn out.
Well, I'm with Commissioner Skeen, I wasn't here last month either. What was the specific request then?
For a variance.
What-
to
yeah,
have-
why- what was
Essentially,
denied?
last month, you have to keep in mind what the design standards requirement says is that areas that are used for access, maneuvering, parking, loading, display, has to be paved with asphalt concrete.
So even out front?
So basically, anywhere a motorized vehicle goes has to be paved. Access, maneuvering, loading, park, it's a broad statement, okay? Well, basically, what their request was last month, they have paved the area in the front of the site where they have parking spaces for, employee vehicles and so forth. And they have paved the access from Industrial Drive, onto their parking lot, okay? And it basically stops at the front of, where the future office would be, but then the rest of the site from that point on back is just, at that time, it was kind of crushed concrete, I guess, at that time. Now, from what this drainage is saying, it's been resurfaced with crushed, with limestone, basically. And so their request last month was that they only be required to do what they had done. That even though they were gonna be driving on the area behind the shop and back to the batch house and back to the concrete plant and the storage bins and so forth, and, that they weren't gonna have to pay.
How current are these photographs?
They're probably within the last.
This is not crushed concrete.
That's probably 3 weeks. Yeah, that's all paved.
Okay.
Have you
So
got,
this doesn't-
have you
this
guys gotten
doesn't-
a quote or a price to pave 8 acres?
It'll be in excess.
Yeah.
So you've since put limestone on top of this? Okay.
So, as I said, basically the request was to not have to pave those other areas, because like, as you can
Right,
probably
no.
tell from looking at the drawing,
Yeah.
there's defined parking for like employee parking, but nowhere on the site is there any particular area that's identified as to where the concrete trucks, for example, will be parked. I mean, I'm assuming that, you know, unless there's some, you know, like Nissan plant or something that comes in, the trucks probably aren't gonna be moving 24/7, you know, that you're probably gonna have them parked there at night, you know, and I'm assuming that it's gonna be somewhere behind the shop, between the shop and the concrete plant. It's not gonna be out front where the employee parking is, you know? And so that becomes a parking lot that's, under the design standards ordinance, would have to be paved.
So, apologies for all the questions, but, so this application is to approve what you've already done by putting limestone on top of your crushed concrete?
Correct.
And then call it a day? Where the thing Tuesday night is whether to agree or deny whether or not you're gonna pave the whole thing, depending on what the aldermen say.
If the alderman determined that his interpretation of it is correct, then you would have to pave everything. It's anywhere a vehicle goes,
Yeah.
vehicles go all over the site.
Commissioner Thorne, if I may too, this is probably one of the more eye-appealing to kind of see where everything's at on concrete. And again, what Mr. Page is saying, you've got trucks going back here. They're not just gonna stop right.
Right.
Everything in yellow, they're still.
Right. Go
which-
through that access drive there by the gate.
Right, that needs to be, based on our recommendation on last month's meeting, to be paved or concrete and not just crushed limestone. So again, this one is going back to, we're, in my opinion, either need to deny this one because we don't know what's gonna happen with the alderman's decision on our recommendation on the last one.
No, I understand.
Well, the motion that's set up is
Well, yeah,
to
exactly.
waive the
that's it.
provision of ground cover, and then thereby allowing the use of crushed concrete over the
Which we
entire
denied, yeah.
site, which is all what we've already heard. I mean, it's already been denied.
Okay, so again, I didn't write that. I'm here to resolve a comment on the permit for the shop, where it says grounds cannot be predominantly gravel crushed limestone.
Is that
That's what I'm
comment,
looking for resolution
is that
on.
comment in here?
Yeah, my variance application is what I provided, which is evidently not what you guys, or is it
Well,
BJ's
oh.
interpretation of the comment?
Well, all I'm saying is that if we were talking about a specific area, like for example, where the future office is gonna be built, okay? If we were talking about a defined area like that, or maybe some smaller areas adjacent to that, you know, that wasn't specified in your application.
Right.
You know,
Again,
there
all
was
I-
no
I'm
way for me to
responding to the
know
comment.
that the request was actually being narrowed into that small area. So, you know,
And that's the only reason I brought this up, because what we're seeing before us is a 10-acre tract, not a defined area. And if we approve this tonight, that's for the 10-acre tract, not, you know, specific areas that you may be wanting, you know, addressed or not addressed or.
Yeah, if the comment is only the one area, that's been resolved, and we wouldn't be here talking about this. But again, when I asked about this, it was, the whole site can't be as it sits. And so that's why, you know,
I just think there's a misunderstanding of the interpretation of the comment, interpretation of how this was written. Essentially, we've got two things on the table. One's on the alderman's desk, one's on our desk, and they essentially seem like the same thing.
correct.
So,
So really, we could table this, see what happens at the Alderman meeting, and then he withdraw his application, and then we done. That makes
I
sense?
think that makes sense too.
what's the?
well, I would only hasten to say, because I want to be sure that everybody understands. Yes, if the board were to overturn the planning commission's denial, of the paving variance, yes, he could withdraw this application and we'd be pretty much done, okay? But if the board upholds the planning commission, this would still have some validity. Now, he may want to come back and identify some specific areas, that he's interested in. But, if they uphold the planning commission,
And you
there
got-
are some paving that would have to be done.
And if we denied this one, you got 10 days to appeal it, correct?
Yeah.
Which is beyond next week's vote,
Right,
which is different than tabling.
right.
So even if we tabled it, and we'll just say the alderman denied it too, he could come back and then adjust this one to specific areas and all of that stuff. So
Well-
give him some little more,
It'd give him some flexibility.
flexibility.
To redefine.
But would it be easier to just submit a new application? I mean, I'm not trying to put any more work on anybody, but I mean, it's, to put the redefined areas in a new application,
Are you suggesting withdraw this one now?
withdraw this one now.
We have to still vote on it though, don't we?
Yeah, we have to still vote on it, yeah.
And then withdraw it, and then wait till next week, and then depending on the outcome of that, reapply?
I mean, if we didn't, I mean, I'm certainly not saying we approve it. You mean table it and then withdraw it? I mean,
Table or deny it, I don't
Yeah.
know.
I don't know, okay.
Just looking at what's the most efficient and convenient way for you too, right? Because you're,
I'm not, I'm not 100% certain on your process. I do know that if it gets denied, then I generally can't clear a comment without coming back to the board. And I don't want to do that. In my experience
There's
elsewhere,
that
I've never been
comment
here.
that final inspection isn't going to,
So you're, yeah, so as long as there's not that hang up, I really.
that's what I mean, I don't have that comment in front of me, so I'm not voting on resolution of a comment.
That's what I'm saying, we're not voting on that. We're
Right.
voting on,
Yeah.
Something that I didn't bring up.
I mean, but it's presented to us. So I mean, in any format, it was brought up somewhere and it's what's being presented, that's what we have to vote on tonight,
Right.
so.
I just don't see the sense in tabling something when it's obviously not what you intended, what you told us to do. It seems like it would make more sense to deny it. Or, I mean, or to approve it, but to deny it, and that way you can resubmit it if you.
Well, it's gonna cost me more money if I do that.
It's application fees, maybe, right?
What's the appeal? Is there a cost associated with an appeal?
I don't think there's any cost associated with the appeal to the board. Basically, if you were to table this application, okay, and he came back to us before the next meeting, with an amendment, basically, of his application, he wouldn't have to pay a new fee for a new application, okay? If it's denied or withdrawn, and he comes back with a new application, then he has to pay another fee, for that new application. Am I right, Kristen?
that's correct.
What I'm saying? And what is the fee for variances?
$330.
Okay, just so that everybody understands. But that's kind of where the difference between the ways you might go about it.
Well, given all the information that in my opinion, I think tabling might be the best approach here, because that saves you from having to reapply. But it also, like BJ just said, is
Leaves the avenue open.
amend it, and based on next week's outcome, you can amend this or withdraw it, because then it might be moot at that point. We don't need to see it next month.
I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah, I just urge you to clarify your
So this
Application.
would be my question to the board there, is I don't get to see what you see. I provide a variance application, and what you see is not what I provide. Or what I provide is included in there. What is read off is not what I provide.
If you want me to go get a copy of what was uploaded to our online portal and what it said you were requesting, I can go get it. But this does not somehow change or is not what you intended. This is exactly what was put on there. You know, you requested to waive the ground cover requirement. You didn't say for this area here or that area there. It was just, you want to waive the ground cover requirement, okay? So what am I supposed to do? That tells me you're requesting the entire site.
I apologize, I didn't mean to attack what was said. I'm just saying that I did not see the language that was provided there. If that was the language that I portrayed, then maybe.
The language we have from you are your comments based on the criteria of the variance, and then what either you or Delta Industries comments, that's what we have, directly your comments. And then some other information, but to Mr. Page's point, there's no definition in this application of what, it's the entire 10 acres.
Correct.
So
That's correct.
that goes back to tabling it to where the request of the table would then be to amend the application and give us more definition or more information so that next month, if you don't withdraw it based on next week, then we have more information and we can make
I agree.
a legitimate
And I
vote.
guess that would be the process I would like to take advantage of.
And that saves you $330.
Any other questions or comments from Mr. Anderson?
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And is there anyone here for or against this application? Please come forward, stating name and address. Again, just before I call for a motion, this is on the 10-acre tract as a whole. I want to make sure we're clear on that and what is being asked. Do I have a motion?
I motion to table the design review variance to waive the provision of ground covering as required by the order.
Second.
Table until,
What would they be?
we need a date.
A date.
Till our next meeting.
All right, I got you. 11th of January.
Are we specifically requesting anything at that next, are we specifically requesting any amendments to this for the table?
I think he had some time to.
I will amend or withdraw prior to the next meeting.
Okay.
I was just gonna say, you know, you have to keep in mind, you can, you know, it's his application, you know. I don't think we can tell him that he's got to amend his application if he doesn't want to.
Well,
You know,
I guess it's
so-
wording then.
I mean, yeah, I
It's
think
just
he knows what
if we ask
direction we're going.
Ask for more information.
Yeah, yeah, I think you can include in there that you'd like more information on it.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
More of a clearer definition of what you're asking.
There is a motion to table until the January 11th, 2022 by Commissioner Hawkins. Do I have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Clark,
Aye.
Commissioner Thorne,
Aye.
Commissioner Jordan. Commissioner Brumbelow,
Aye.
Commissioner Hawkins, Commissioner Skeen.
Aye.
All right, the motion to table until January 11th of 2022 passes.
2022.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about it.
2022.
Mr. Page, before we go any further, some things that have been presented in some past hearings, just like tonight about the bollards, is there something that we could do to possibly add that one color to that, so when it comes up, it may be something we don't have to hear as a variance, and it can just be,
I think what we can do, you know, in order to not have it be a variance, I think it involves an amendment
or maybe,
to the design standards ordinance And that is certainly something that we can undertake. It's a situation where we have other provisions in the ordinance currently where certain provisions that apply to commercial and multifamily, for example, are accepted from industrial. As an example, we don't allow metal buildings in commercial and multifamily developments, okay? Basically metal-clad buildings. That's why we had to have a variance on the energy project, when they came in with their design, which included a lot of metal, on that particular application. In the industrial zones, there's an exception that says, basically what the ordinance says is, you can't have metal as a predominant, exterior design element in commercial and multifamily, but you can in industrial. So if somebody came in and wanted to build a big metal warehouse building, they can do that, in industrial. So, we can certainly look between now and the next meeting with developing a similar provision for bollards. I mean, it wouldn't be that big a deal.
Because it falls under the building and form materials section of the colors and everything.
Yeah.
And there's no real definition of safety and hazard.
Well, I personally think it would be a good amendment to make. Not particularly because I care one way or the other about bollards, in industrial, but, I agree with Mr. Anderson, the greater specificity in the ordinance is always a good thing, as long as it reflects, what you guys are interested in doing.
And I think that's such a common thing in that specific of bollards that we could almost agree with OSHA's standard of that bright safety yellow.
Yep.
Sure.
Not only to protect the customer, but individuals, if they ran into a gas tank because they backed up too far and blew it up, so little, it could happen, but I mean.
No, it's a good idea because the future development of industrial drive, that's gonna grow up through there.
And I think it's such a standard that people almost ignore that safety yellow because they understand that's just safety, so if we could look into that, I think that would help all sides of the commission and the planning department too, so.
Sure.
All right, we're still at a stalemate with the comprehensive plan, I'm assuming, because.
No report.
No report, okay.
I'll just to be quite frank with everybody, I really don't think we'll do anything until after the holidays. To be sure, because it's just gonna be difficult.
Commissioner Skeen and Commissioner Thorne, anybody else out last month? We actually talked about, a couple of us getting together, kind of reviewing certain sections. I was gonna lead that effort and I haven't, so, but that's.
You act like you're all busy or something.
I might be. But anyway, that's some things we'd like to look at that we can present concerns or anything and be a little more detailed in it, with 2 or 3 minds together, and then present it to BJ. He was gonna present it back to the, can't think of the company, but.
Mr. Walker.
Mr. Walker. And then when they present it to us, they have those things addressed. And
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Just let me know. When.
clarity, so.
So you're thinking after the holidays? Probably.
Probably, I'm not gonna say it now because I couldn't even commit to it last time, so, yeah, with Christmas coming up and stuff, so. And I think the way that this is, I think that would give us an opportunity to be sure of what questions we wanted to ask, if they were presented, that can be answered and not cause a timely manner for everybody. It'll be a lot more structured for us, so.
So you're gonna host a barbecue and we're all gonna talk about it?
Jordan Brumbelow is, so. All right, so,
Keep in mind, y'all can only have 3 people.
that's right, we can't meet in any more than
Oh.
3, so that's the,
Well, that brings up another question for me, just understanding like a quorum. So that if all of us are interested in having that discussion, could there be multiple meetings with the three at a time? Could you do something like that
That's,
so
I
everybody?
think
can
it's
go?
what we're talking about
Yeah.
doing, and basically, it's gonna be, as much as I hate to say it, I think it's gonna wind up being the staff's responsibility to try and bring what, one group of three discusses or has questions about or whatever to the other groups, and
Like a round
kind of
robin
coordinate
thing?
that discussion.
Yeah. Okay,
Otherwise, it's a quorum.
yeah.
If one of the group members
Right.
does the presentation.
All right, any other business? If not, I have a motion to adjourn in a second.
Second?
Who was the
Motion.
Shay. Who was the second?
Horn, Mr. Horn.
Okay. I'll just do an all in favor. All in favor?
Forgot that.
Aye.
Ayes have it. We're adjourned.